how thin is too thin when it comes to the blade. We'll start with the first knife that I released. This was made for me overseas, and you can see it does have a really nice thin cutting edge on it. So that's good. It was hardened, at least this one was hardened pretty well. I'm pressing on the side. You can see it's nice and hard, so it won't flex a whole lot. And let's see how it cuts. You have to take my word for it that was not too much pressure to make that cut. Now these are some pretty big 3-corner chips as well. That was nice and easy. And so is that one. Oh, it performed really well. So then the question, well, why didn't I keep going with these knives, was because quality control issues. Some of the blades were hardened properly, and then other ones would be either hardened too much or too little, so they'd either break or bend. So that's why I had to find someone else. It led me to another manufacturer, this time stateside, who produced these knives for me. Okay, and you can look at the cutting edge here. It's fairly thin, not quite as thin as the first edition knives, but I'm not even going to show this to you because I had to do so much of the grinding to get a nice sharp cutting edge that it wasn't worth my time to work with them any longer, so I had to do away or find a new manufacturer in short order. Which led me to a company that manufactures razor blades, and so all of their grinded blades are hollow ground. Okay, so this portion from the cutting edge to that line is actually slightly hollowed, making for a very nice thin surface right where that hollow grind is. Okay, it's very thin through there. So that's a big advantage of the hollow grind. Let's take it for a test run and see how it cuts. Very similar to the first edition knives. That was a nice smooth cut. That was easy as well. And so is that cut. Okay, so it cuts very well. The reason I had to make a change was because some of the blades were ground so thin and it was hardened up around 63 Rockwell that it was too brittle. And several of the owners of the first edition knives of this style would break off the tips of their knives. And so while they cut really well, they performed so nicely, I couldn't send out knives where my customers would be frustrated in the middle of a carving, the tip would break. Both of these knives, if you look closely, are both hollow ground as well. This one is a modified knife, and so you'll see it's really thin on the end as well. But some of the same problems that I had with the cutting knife came up in the modified knives where the points would break off. That's what happened with this knife when it was returned to me. The point was broken off, so I re-ground it, and now I've got a very rigid blade, very thin cutting edge, and it performs really well after the modifications that I made to it. I had some blades from them that I hand ground myself. Now take a look at this one. This is the thinnest blade that I've ever ground. When they get this thin, they will tend to flex a little bit. So let's take this one, put it to the board, and give it a try. Of all the knives I've ever had and ground, this one cuts super easy. I hardly have to push down, in removing such a large 3-corner chip. It just cuts really easy. That's the major advantage of a really thin blade. It just cuts effortlessly. The problem is that the blade will tend to flex on the bottom of a cut. So while I push this knife down, if I can keep the pressure straight to the point, it will stay relatively straight in the bottom of the cut. But if I have to move the knife at all to adjust the cut, maybe along the line, it's going to flex and does not follow the line very easily. It wants to follow the wood grain rather than the direction that I want to take it. All because the blade is so ultra thin. All of this brings me to the place where I'm at today with the Diamond Deluxe knives. Okay, the Diamond Deluxe knives have a good balance between all these features. You can see the cutting edge, not as thin as the hollow ground edges, but also not as flexible as the hollow ground. So I've not had a single one of these with the tip that breaks off, because you'll see this knife has been flat ground. Okay, it's a flat surface from the spine down to the beginning of the cutting edge. Okay, so the flat grind adds to the strength of the blade. There's more metal behind the cutting edge, and it performs very nicely. Sure, it takes a little more effort to make the cut because it's not quite as thin, but it was going to follow the line very well. You don't have to worry about the blade flexing, and as long as you keep it nice and sharp, you'll be able to do some fantastic chip carving. Okay, so there's a brief rundown of how thin is too thin when it comes to blades on your chip carving knives.